This is the Dog Savant Podcast with your host, Brett Endies.
Hey everyone, this is the Dog Savant Podcast, episode 2. I am Brett Endies. I am your host. I'm a professional dog trainer for 25 years, and I focus on problem behavior cases in dogs. Today's episode, number 2, is going to be about leash pulling. So we're going to talk, we're going to jump right into that. I also want to thank you to anyone who listened to episode 1, the welcome episode. It was kind of more of an overview of what to expect. So today we're going to jump into more specific dog related subject matter, or dog training behavior subject matter. So leash pulling. I think anyone who lives in any kind of, city or suburban area can observe that there's a lot of dogs, and this may be something that you're struggling with as well, who are walking ahead of their owners. And it's not just a casual ahead. I mean, these dogs are pulling, lunging. You get something called leash reactivity, which is really a major issue for dogs. It leads to them ending up, with, at the best, not having a full life. They don't get enough exercise or socialization, and they're living with an anxiety of, usually reactivities when they see another dog or person on a walk, and they overreact, become overstimulated. And in the worst case, these dogs are getting put in shelters and put to sleep for these behaviors that are really based in a dog having an issue with walking, because unfortunately, we do not understand what drives dogs to pull or to have these issues. And it all comes down to how we properly walk our dog and get them to remain present up to and including when any of these potential triggers would come about. So what I'm getting to is we want to talk about the root of the problem. If we don't know why there's an issue, we're never able to resolve it. And then the second part, I want to talk about some solutions and strategies that you can put in place to help you with the leash pulling issue if you or your dog is struggling with this. So why do dogs pull on a leash? Okay, dogs are natural born hunters. They're meant to forge ahead. They're meant to project to a very specific focal point, and if you will, shoot their body and project to it in the most efficient, quickest way possible to get a means to an end. They have that instinct. So when they're out and about, especially very driven dogs and dogs that are kind of really ready to go and wired in a way where they get easily stimulated, it creates what I call the mental rubber band effect. And it's not a real thing. It's just a term I use to paint a picture for my clients so they can visualize their dog's experience, because it's not like their dog is just like, I feel like pulling. It's not a conscious thought. It's a deep-rooted instinct and impulse that can become a bad habit. So again, what is that mental rubber band syndrome? The way I describe it is your dog may very well see themselves already out down the street on the walk, and you haven't even left the house yet. And then what happens is their body feels like a slingshot trying to get from A to B, where they literally visualize, because if they were hunting or forging ahead in the forest, they would, it would be a very efficient way to operate where you can kind of, not kind of get caught up in any one moment because you have to get to, again, a means to an end. They're living with us now, and the problem is when dogs are operating that way, when we're just trying to kind of flow together, they're getting overstimulated, and what happens is they're just like in hyperspace mode, and everything is coming at them too intense, and that, again, not only causes the pulling, it leads directly to your reactivity, your overexcited greetings, you're jumping, you're getting overexcited when they go to a new environment or a new place or there's new things going on. The transitional nature just gets the best of them because they're in a heightened state of alert to begin with. A dog should walk in a more calm, casual, kind of like when you're hiking or you're taking a nice stroll on the beach where you're getting some exercise and movement, but you're kind of just staying in the moment. And we can teach a dog to do that, actually a lot better than humans can remain in the moment. We have our anxieties. Dogs only have it because they live with us and we promote it. So again, we have to work on getting that mental rubber band back to where the dog's physical presence actually is. So that's what we have to do. And again, we'll talk about how to achieve that, because a lot of it is this focus building and teaching a dog a good heel or a sidewalking command like let's go, to focus their mind and body to one position while you're walking together. That really is like the antidote for it. As far as equipment, because I see what happens now is, like I was in Hungary last month, and I was observing, I was in Budapest, and I see all these dogs walking around, and they don't have these issues. They're just calmly walking. They're all on proper collars or training collars. And, it's because the owners don't rush up to each other. There's certain, in Central Europe, a little bit more of a serious nature to everyday life. And dogs kind of thrive on that because, up until recently, things weren't so easy for us as humans. And we were more serious when we had dogs around us. And we enjoyed them, but we also had a purpose for them. And that in itself gave them satisfaction. So even when they're walking, the more serious mind and the order created makes the dogs feel that they can just follow their owner without getting caught up in the extraneous. And then the fact that they don't let each other's dogs rush up to each other and do all these things where you're promoting and rewarding the impulsive, over-projected mental rubber band kind of state, just creates these habits of your reactivity, your pulling, and your overexcited walks. So again, what we do in our country and other places in the world is we are being too passive to not only addressing and talking about why, it's a little complicated, if you will, but we have to understand why the dogs pull and why certain dogs have more potential than others. But we also have to use the right equipment. We have to let our emotions go to the wayside and see what's really going on. Unfortunately, a lot of people now are walking their dogs with harnesses. And I get a lot of shit for this because people think that because I'm saying don't use a harness, it means, well, let's just choke the dog to make them listen because I recommend a collar. That's not what's really going on. But the harness does trigger an opposition reflex. It's meant to teach dogs to pull or create physical security for their body, like if they're in a seatbelt or some kind of security harness, even wearing a backpack, that's appropriate. I have cases where we do carting. If you ever see my videos where I cart with the Huskies of Beverly Hills, and we've taught them on a harness, but when I walk them, it's a different thing. It's different scenarios, and dogs are very good at compartmentalizing. So, we teach a dog to pull on a harness for carting or for tracking. On command, when they wear the harness, they know to pull. But if you're walking through your neighborhood, you don't want that. It's going to just lead to not only pulling, if they ever get off leash, they're going to just keep drawing forward and run off, and that's never going to be safe. And they're going to get issues like reactivity and over-impulsive, overexcited greetings. Because of that, they're already 10 steps ahead and they're just too ready to go for every new stimuli that encounters. And if you're someone who deals with this with your dog, when you're walking in the neighborhood, it's like every person that comes in and out of their house, or every car door that opens, or every new person, or even around your house, you'll see just moving around. The transitional nature gets certain dogs in this heightened state of alert, and that's what's driving, all your behavior issues. And you'll see there'll be a theme to that when we talk about this in other related podcasts down the road for other behavior problems and issues that people struggle with their dogs. So the harnesses promote a lot of, when they pull, they project ahead and it just stretches that mental rubber band more. If your dog's a perfect walker and you're comfortable with a harness, albeit, but what happens is that it's promoting, because even with little dogs, you're trying to hold them back. Yeah, you're going to physically maybe get some control, but mentally you're not touching it. And that's the issue, is you need to have the dog mentally and physically in state. So how do we teach a dog to do that? We have to build some focus, whether it be in a stationary command like sitting down, whether it be a moving command like let's go, come. It's keeping their mind and building like a muscle the endurance to hold it. So what I like to do is start shaping the behavior for the let's go. I also, and I'll talk about equipment in a second, but just to teach a dog, I want to make it clear. So I might practice in a very low distraction environment, like indoors or in a backyard a dog's familiar with. And just for a few days build. When I say let's go, when you assume that position next to me while we move, you get a reward, whether it be physical or treat. And the treats we can do to teach and shape and improve behaviors, but we're not relying on it. You're never going to see me with a bait pouch unless I'm training a fucking dolphin. So what we have to do is establish that. But there's also an instinct where dogs know that if you're walking in a certain more direct way, where you're taking the initiative to lead them to a certain space and give them a command or a job, you're walking more in sync, and the instinct to take human direction is still strong in most dogs. So what happens is that it starts tapping into that. Even if they don't pick up on a perfect concept that, heel or let's go means stay in this one spot on the left or right as we walk, and I'm going to build that focus. It's the idea that, you're kind of leading me. And that's why if you wear a collar, training collar, flat collar, martingale, there's different options for different dogs, and what works for one might not work for another. But in general, something worn high up behind a dog's ears steers them a lot more efficiently. Just like when you see them playing, they're mouthing each other and they're kind of creating these angles. There's a meaning to that. They're trying to kind of herd each other, and that's what they've evolved into, sheep herding and livestock work, and just that kind of wanting to kind of control the movement of another party. And we can tap into that. Now, how do we do that? we have to be able to communicate through a leash the proper amount of pressure and release. And that's different than what people think is, oh, put a choke chain on the dog, and when they start pulling, snap it. That's not how we're doing this. This is not corrective training. And even if we're using a pinch collar or a star mark or a martingale, there's more of a pressure release that's well timed, so they get a very clear idea of how to hold their attention. It's not so much jerking on it to show them that they did something wrong. I know that dogs, they're not just good or bad. Like we see things positive, negative, and that's what's happened in the dog training world. It's all become polarized because we don't see that animals in nature has more of a balanced set point that is not based in a good or evil type of thinking that we as humans have instilled upon us. Don't want to get too that's another podcast to get philosophical. But anyway, what we have to do is we have to promote that focus. And that's what it's almost like if you wanted me to pay attention and you were over there and I'm sitting here doing something and you just keep doing this, it's kind of undeniable. And eventually, like, I'll learn, like, well, if that person says something to me, they're going to constantly get my attention. And then that becomes more comfortable for me to, okay, that's important. That's what's going to work in this moment because maybe that person knows better. And the reality is dogs are living in our society we created. This is a very confusing place that we live in with them. And we have to take that ownership of guiding them through, even if it's how we walk around the block. They can handle being ahead and thinking mental rubber band mindsets of what's ahead and what's we're going to encounter. Some dogs can, but they shouldn't be pulling you. Even a little ahead, they should be kind of checking back in with you. It's like when you go hiking, dogs, right? They patrol and then they come back in because it's not a stimulating environment. That's the difference. A lot of people say, oh, we go hiking and camping and our dogs are great, but when we walk in the neighborhood, they react to every dog they see. Very clear pattern. You see that because dogs know when they're in the mountains, we're in a more basic state, we're in a more basic environment, less going on, and it just feeds into a more balanced mindset organically. What we have to do is create that in our everyday life when we're walking our dog. So we have to teach the heel command, the let's go command, some kind of focus. But we also have to be preemptive. We don't want to just put the leash on and go because I'm assuming if your dog has these issues, they already know that pattern. We have to teach something different. So what we have to do is kind of plan our walks in advance or plan an event in advance where it's going to cause the behavior issues that we're struggling with so we can create just like a complete different effect so the dog starts learning to get comfortable with a new norm. So what we want to do is and again, we're going to do more episodes on this, but some place training or warm-up exercises. Oh God, it could be 20, 30, 40 minutes in advance if you have the time, where your dog is just kind of focused in some kind of engagement of command, so they're in just kind of that state of non-anticipation. And then you would lead them to the door. You also want to do some exercises when you open and close the door because it's like opening the gates to Oz. When you open up the door to outside, your dog is like, oh, pulled in, and you have to teach your dog to hold off on that impulse and almost filter it with that mental horse blinders till you lead them out, because that stuff gets the best of them, that excitement. And I'm telling you, you should promote your dog to get excited, but not for the walks, not when you're just living life around the house. It should be like when a child goes to recess or extracurricular sports. Now we're here to go play. Now get excited. Right? You don't let them just assume everyday life, because your dog is going to live in a constant excited state and waiting for the next shoe of life to fall for every new event or new environment you head to. And that's not a happy dog. That's the definition of dog anxiety. So as you lead the dog out, actually I tell people, and I find my clients, the first leg of the journey, especially when you're starting this new habit for the first couple weeks, you want to really go slow. You want to teach your dog to focus. If they're going a little ahead, you go a little slower. If they go ahead, you turn back around and backtrack. If they can't just control their mind, they're getting too stimulated, stop and let them sit for 30 seconds or a minute. Let them decompress. As you're encountering a dog, you don't want to avoid it or lock up and get nervous. You want to show confidence. You want to engage the command and say, hey, here's what I'm going to show you that it's for the money. And you'll start seeing, I'm pretty confident when I see a new client, they're like, really, you can make my dog listen in one lesson? Because if you tap into this, the dogs can respond. It doesn't mean they're fixed. And it certainly doesn't mean they're going to respond to the owner. But it definitely means that you're meeting a greater potential right away because you're tapping into something they understand. And like I said before, even if they haven't formally been taught how to heel yet, if you walk them in a more structured, kind of planned out, strategic way where you're the one leading them, not in a domineering physical way, just by having a good game plan and adhering to the job you want them to do while you're encountering life, you'll see right away a huge experience. Then that new way of operating becomes the norm, and over a certain part of time, it becomes conditioned into them, And then that's it. Then you can be more casual. You don't have to be 40 minutes in advance before a walk. But maybe for a couple weeks, it's like a rehab thing. You've got to pull a full 180 for how these dogs have formed some bad habits. And if you have a puppy that's learning this, maybe you want to get your arms around it now, because I find that they're a lot more open to learning new concepts than a dog that's years old and, set in their ways. And usually once they get about a year and a half, 2 years, I get the calls where they start showing that reactivity where, I don't know, he just used to get excited when he'd see a new dog on the walk. That builds into frustration with certain dogs that have that potential. So this will curb your reactivity. It'll give your dog that conscious state I'm talking about, so they can actually see a dog without that blinding, unconscious, I'm just going to go into fight or flight, creating space mode between me and the dog or what I'm insecure about, and say, all right, now that you're in control, I've got it to do. Let me check it out and look. We'll also do more videos, by the way, that'll demo this. I do have, if you want to look at my web series, if you go on my YouTube channel, if you go on my website, dogtrainingla.com or thedogsavant.com, you'll link to any video that'll get you on my web. I don't know my YouTube URL, unfortunately, but I have a web series. I have a lot of other videos. My web series, my man Jordan here, my producer, edited it out, and it looks a very good way of painting a picture of the way I do this with my clients. And there's a couple episodes that'll show how you can implement the place. And there's even an episode on walking that may help kind of complement this podcast as well. So that's that. And again, there's other issues usually with dogs that pull, where they're kind of always over anticipating and tracking movement, just getting too ahead of themselves in everyday life skills. So we'll talk about that as well, but I don't want to make it too many things in one podcast, so we'll stick with the walking. But that is going to directly help with walking. So you'll see all these subjects that we kind of put together on our podcast are all going to have like a general kind of theme that's going to help kind of cover like any kind of behavior problem you deal with. And we're going to have obedience and training and tricks and all that stuff too. But this is important. Leash pulling has to stop. So that's that. Now, I want to just touch a little bit, and this is where the rant might come in, a little bit about, Jordan, did I explain that well? Is there anything I should be explaining with the leash pulling that I forgot before I move on? The equipment. We'll also do a subject on equipment. The video does. Yeah, and the equipment, again, we'll talk more in detail. I'll have equipment I'll show you here in the video so we can talk more in detail, demonstrate it hopefully with dogs. But just realize that harnesses, even those gentle leaders, they're a Band-Aid. They're not quite addressing the problem if your dog struggles with leash pulling or reactivity. My dog listens better with it. Try not using it and see if your dog ever learned any real lifelong skill. I want to teach your dog and kind of resolve the issue so we can move on with life. What was I going to... shitty dog ownership. Yeah. So, there's a problem, and it's more and more lately. A lot of my clients and people I see on Facebook complain about it, is people who have their dogs off leash where it's not supposed to be off leash. I encounter this all the time. I hike in a place across the street from my house, a beautiful park. My dogs can listen off leash. They're on command. They would stay with me anyway, but I use a leash because that's the rule. Okay. And there's people I encounter at least once or twice a week that have their dogs off leash, and they'll run up to either me or my dogs he's friendly. He's friendly, has nothing to do with it. My dogs are friendly too, but I'm going to ask you first if they can play, if that's something that I even want to deal with. Because as a dog trainer, maybe I just want to be kind of in a little mode with my own dogs for an hour and take a break from dealing with another person's dogs who may not be the most balanced dogs. Just when I'm off the clock for that little window of time, I'm looking to have some inner peace. But it's always the he's friendly, or they let the dog rush up to you on a retractable leash, which those things should have never been invented. They just never should have been invented. And again, it's this indulgent, if I say something on social media and 2 people like it, that means that I'm valid in anything I do. So now I have rights. That means I'm entitled to shit. And here in Los Angeles, it's a little worse than I think other places. But this is a lot of people I see everywhere, in the world, more or less. Not hungry. It's like an epidemic. And it's not only leading to their dogs having these reactivity issues like I was just describing, it's just inconsiderate. And I have a lot of clients who need to get their dogs out in the world and get them acclimated and socialized and see other dogs in a controlled setting. And that's why I do my groups. But they have a right to, if they know this is an on-leash area for dogs, they should not have to worry about or deal with somebody else's dogs on leash, off leash rather. The other thing is the way these people, when you ask them politely, please put your dog on leash, we're training our dogs a little shy, whatever you say to be nice and kind to get them to see reason, Most of these people get fucking defensive, like we have something wrong with us. Like, why are you bringing a dog like that in public? Because it's on a leash and there's a law, and I have a right to bring my dog on a leash if it's not bothering anyone or getting in their space. And that's what I think it's about. It's about people not learning how to respect other people's space or what they're going through and taking a step back before they just go for it. Maybe ask. Guys, tell people, again, if you ask me, I'll talk to you and we'll conversate, and any questions I'm willing to answer, and maybe we'll let our dogs play, or maybe I'll pet your dog. But, and again, on the other side, don't come pet someone else's dog. There's a lot of people with bona fide service dogs that they are having people walk up to them, and these are like seeing eye dogs, not just like emotional support animals, like real deal dogs that are, people's lives are at stake, and these entitled people think that they can come up to somebody and just start petting their dog. You don't even ask, but even if you ask, at least that's giving that window of time for the person to say, I would rather you not because we're working here, or I'm in a client session. You get people come up to. I've had people who just, I'm finally like, listen, we're training the dog. I've asked you 5 times, you need to stop. And then of course they always get mad at me. I've been called an asshole, a jerk, a dick. I had one lady who was petting a dog who was nervous at the dog park, and we had to kind of get it moving so it wasn't bottlenecking in the corner, and the dogs were sensing that, and she starts running over and petting it like she's Mother Teresa trying to save it. And I'm like, excuse me, we're here trying to help this dog socialize, and it's not helping what you're doing. And we kind of like just took the dog and moved it on. And she came up to me 5 minutes later and gave me a whole lecture, this young 20-something girl who had not a clue what was going on. I'm usually wearing my shirt that says my business name on it, so you know that I'm somewhat, this is what my job is. So at the very least, if I'm doing my job, leave me alone to do it. And I was very polite the first through the 4th time, until after the 5 times I have to just say, we're out of here. Sometimes I think, and I tell my clients, and I find, good for all you, and please be an advocate for your dog and other people who are doing good work. I find more people are being more outspoken. They're not afraid of being shamed for being mean or unfriendly or unpolitically correct. We're tired of that shit. And I told you in the last podcast, I'm a real advocate for living your life, not having people judge you for the way you operate or the peace that you want, and people respecting your boundaries and limitations, or how you may think differently or speak differently, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's become so out of control, and again, this has infiltrated my realm, the dog realm, and it's really putting dogs, in bad places and not helping. So we have to talk a little bit more real instead of what feels best, because dog behavior can be gritty sometimes. It's not a, oh, it's all fun. That's cool. That's trick training. We can go do cute things. That's the good side of dog life. Unfortunately, I'm dealing with some severe shit. It's like my brother who works in a rehab house, and he deals with people who are going through drug addiction. That's not the pretty side of therapy. These people are kicking and screaming. And it's funny because I said, why do these people have to come? These people are successful people, and they have to come live and be told how to operate 24/7 by you for 30 days. Well, why is that? He goes, Brett, it's not like they, 24/7, they're doing their habits, but their whole life is revolved around their habits. So they need to learn a whole new regimen of life. So when they go out on their own at some point, it becomes now familiar enough so they can do it independent of me micromanaging it. And this is what happens a lot of times with the dogs. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of telling the dog they're not doing properly. And I don't believe in what you call punishment. There's some trainers that use I like to look like you hear, deal with why something happens and address the root of it and teach the dog a new experience instead of just wait for it to happen and you're putting out fires. And that's why I say it's like, okay, I keep lighting matches and throwing it on the ground. Eventually a fire's going to start. Why don't I just throw the matches away, and then we don't have that potential, and that's how you deal with the root of an issue. And that's even for human psychology. We're too medicated. We're too avoidant. We're putting a Band-Aid on shit instead of getting in there, the uncomfortable, gritty stuff. And that's what we need to do for dog behavior too. Okay, I think I've said my piece. Let me see any announcements. I took my bow hunter certification on Saturday. I know some of you vegans will love this, and PETA people. I passed. I got a perfect score. I'm now a certified bow hunter. I'm excited. And I've been doing some videos of my adventures of kind of learning how to do this and becoming proficient, where hopefully maybe next year you'll see me on a hunt and just kind of side chronicle thing. Other than that, thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe. And thank you for watching. And if there's any questions, I also would love to start answering listener questions. I used to do that on my other podcast. So send them, email me, dogtrainingla@gmail.com. And again, my website is dogtrainingla.com or thedogsavant.com. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for episode 3. Have a great day.